You're listening to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright. Heartbeat Radio is a conversation aimed to take the pulse of corporate America. Opportunities for people of color, we're getting lost in the shuffle of change. I'm that provocateur of change. The hearts of corporate America are addressed. Access and opportunities will be accelerated for all people. Through Heartbeat Radio, you will gain a deeper understanding of what is necessary for change. Good evening, everybody. It's Cindi Bright. It's Monday evening, blistering cold outside this evening. I am so elated this evening because I have as my guest tonight on the show just a fierce woman who is trailblazing. And I want to welcome Shasti Conrad to Heartbeat Radio. Shasti, thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I love getting to spend time with you.
I am so excited for you. So for the world to know, on Saturday afternoon, Shasti was elected to be the first woman of color to become the chair to the King County Democrats. And so, yes, yes, that is so huge. And so when I got the text that you had got it, I'm not gonna lie, Shasti, breaking that barrier is such a big deal. Before we get into that, I need you to know who this woman is first, right? So I did a little bit of homework on her, but I'm going to let her talk about herself too, because Shasti has worked on Barack Obama's campaign, on Bernie Sanders' campaign, who has a master's in public entities, who has just been doing. Shasti, tell the world your background. Start there.
Okay, yes. Well, I moved up to the Seattle area to go to Seattle University, and I studied sociology and international affairs. And I graduated into the Barack Obama campaign. He announced my senior year. It happened to be my senior thesis on political participation in the Seattle hip hop community.
Oh,
and
fit right into where you're having the radio here.
And Senator Barack Obama's announcement changed, the research that I was doing, because here we had someone who was from that hip hop generation, man of color who really connected with the community. And so I just wanted to go be helpful. And I had read Dreams from My Father, and I'm adopted. I was born in Calcutta, India, and was adopted by a single mother and raised in a small town in Oregon. And so Barack Obama's story felt very close to mine, and I felt very connected to him.
Wow.
And so I just wanted to help. And so I went and worked on his campaign here in Washington State. I was a field organizer and Obama fellow, and that's where I learned how to do community organizing. I learned how to make those phone calls, knock on doors, how to shape your story, how to tell your story. And I followed him. We weren't supposed to win. That wasn't, we were just doing it because we believed in him and his vision for a more inclusive country, more inclusive America. And so when he won, I went to the White House and was in the first class of interns. In the summer of 2009, I worked in the Office of Urban Affairs, and I was supposed to go to graduate school that fall, and decided I wanted to stay, in, and wanted to be a part of the administration. So I was hired on in the Office of Public Engagement, where I worked on disability issues. And then I worked for Valerie Jarrett, who's another strong woman of color. And I learned a great deal from her, and was there for the first term of the Obama administration before going to work on the 2012 campaign in Chicago.
That is incredible. It's so awesome.
Yes.
You did that. What did you mean by you said we weren't supposed to win?
Well, I always like to take folks back to, 2007, 2008. President Obama was not the favored candidate. Hillary Clinton was.
Yeah.
And Hillary Clinton was backed by the party, and she was sort of the presumptive nominee in many ways. And
so you're telling me there's still hope
right.
for me? You're not supposed to win. You're not supposed to be in this election.
Right,
but
exactly.
It's how a lot of people of color get started, right? You step into something that we're not supposed to do. We're not supposed to be. We're not supposed to start that high. You're not supposed to. Who do you think they are? Blah, 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 blah. Right? You understand that, girl, right?
Yes. And he always made the joke, a funny looking guy with big ears, and, Barack Hussein Obama, you don't normally think is supposed to get to the highest office in the land. But, he built this incredible structure of people who are so committed to a vision, and he did it by community organizing.
I get it. I come from this fabulous district who is building with me and still doing that, right? And so it is exciting when new faces and new voices come to the table, and we kind of sludge out what you have to do, right? To get yourself where you need to be so that we can affect change. And so to that point, Shasti, talk to our listeners about what's your plan.
Yes. Well, so we ran on the platform of sort of Vision 2020, and the office that I'm in will be for 2 years, which will see us through 2019's municipal elections, and then also obviously the 2020 presidential cycle. And what I had found, I was the first vice chair for the last 8 months of this past year with King County Democrats, is that we lost our way. We didn't have a clearly defined mission. We didn't have a really clearly defined identity as to what the county party was supposed to do. And what I really wanted to get us back to was being a support system for the legislative districts. And when I ran for first vice chair, and I was acting chair for a month, and I put out a survey to ask for feedback as to what the county party could do better than, the LDs, and what they could do better than the state. And what consistently came back was to be a coordinating agency for the LDs and to organize across constituencies that don't fit neatly into legislative districts. And so that's where I want us to focus on. I want us to be the support system, but I want us to also be the place where we're bringing in underrepresented communities, and we're really bringing in new members into the party. When I came back into the party at the end of 2016, hundreds of people were in the legislative district Democratic Party meetings. And I've watched over the course of the last 2 years as those numbers have dwindled.
Well, let's break that down.
Yeah.
Let's break that down, Shasti. So, one of the, call it the debates or the rubs, I guess, and this is just through my lens, okay? So you can correct me if I'm off base. I'm a system set up for people of color to win, right? And so when you pre-select opportunities for people, which is what happened in my district, right? My district was pre-selected, and there was a whole movement behind the scene by the incumbent before the announcement that incumbent was retiring to set up the next person in line. And so so that's issue number one. Issue number two is that communities of color, my whole reason to start Heartbeat Radio, did you hear the intro to it, was about equity, and people of color are earning as much as 40% less than white people in business. And so our ability to have the wealth that is needed to win these offices disadvantages us, right? And so one of the issues or the areas that I wanted to probe with you on tonight is you do want to work with the communities of color. How are you going to go after the actual system, because we can bring people all you want to the table. It's no different than corporate America saying we hire, but you
Right.
bring them in and then you don't develop them and you don't help them and you don't pay them. How do we deal with that? And are you thinking about what to do about that system?
Yes, and I think a lot of it is trying to open up the doors and air a lot of this stuff out, because I think that it's been kept to people who know how to work the system and who have been trained to work that system, which predominantly is not people of color. And there's been a lot of talk around the right way to do things. And my vision is that we're able to communicate directly to the folks that we're supposed to be representative of, which is members of the community, our PCOs, and that when we're going out to try to connect with these communities and communities of color in particular, that it's a two-way street. What I've seen is that a lot of times Democrats will take folks of color for granted, and we just assume that they're just going to vote for us because
it's our vote that's putting them in office.
Right.
So
Right.
What is frustrating is our votes and our money is what's putting them in office, but where is the backing for us?
Yes.
And even in my own campaign, I would have been fine if I would have been treated respectfully and a conversation had and some level of support. But to ignore you and act as if you are non-existent, it's why you said the pool was diminishing, right? We have to deal with this in every aspect of our life. And so people who want change, we're not running because it pays any money.
Right.
It's not like we're getting rich on serving
This is a volunteer role, by the way. Chair of King County Democrats is volunteer.
Thank you for doing this, though, right? Like, it's a big deal to have your voice and your influence now to be able to start opening up the dialogue that needs to be had. And look, I'm a rebel and they all know it, right? So I'm going to push that conversation and not just the conversation, but action behind it, because to get into office, elected office is about money. And so, I'm just going to ask on air. Shasta, we just need help, building that pipeline or the backers, because
let me tell you one of the ideas that we have.
Okay.
So I think many people know that the county party went through a bit of a leadership challenge earlier in the year, and some of the issues were around use of funds. And so for me, when we're raising money, I want every dollar to have a plan. And one of the plans that we have is to create a scholarship fund for underrepresented communities, people who want to go through all of these candidate trainings. There's the Emerge program, there's Institute for Democratic Future. There's a lot of these great programs that become a pipeline to help develop the skill set, but then to match people via networks into these various elected positions. So we want to develop a scholarship fund to be able to help cover those candidate trainings for people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford a lot of the fees. So the training is an aspect of it, but and it's an important aspect. The other aspect that I know at least one other organization is tackling right now is to be able to give people of color a cash start, because I learned it in my own campaign. You need a minimum of $25,000 to come out of the chute, because what people don't recognize is what you have to pay for are, and by the way, a whole nother dialogue on these damn campaign consultants. So I'm going to keep that real about what I learned the hard way about being exploited by campaign consultants, because they love to take our money and don't do jack to help us, right? And I have names, just so y'all know. You can PM me on that one. But you do need support. And for people who are first-time candidates, even though you're trained, I went to the caucus training right after Trump won office, and everybody kept pushing me to go, and I went, and I remember texting my friend and said, there's no way in hell I'm doing anything like this, right? And then here I was doing something like this. But it is a money base, and when we're running against white privileged wealth, they have access to cash, and they know how to maneuver the system to get the kind of money into their campaigns to help them win. And so that's an issue for future people of color that are trying to run, is
we're less likely to have that kind of money because of how we are not progressed in business, right? So that takes away earning power. We don't have the discretionary incomes that a lot of white people have access to. And we're not networked because we're in a different class.
Right.
This classism that goes on, right?
Right.
And so that, in my opinion, is the bigger problem that we have to solve for, that if we mean what we say, and where I saw the money come into campaigns of color is only when they, we're obviously Democrat versus Republican, but we have to get ready because there's going to be a lot of people coming out of the woodworks in 2020 that are going to be multiple people, Democrats running against each other. So where does the party step in and help whom? That's a question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, it's just trying to find these opportunities and to do the bench building, to give people an opportunity to get their name out there early on, to build the skill set, to be able to get to build the network. I think that's incredibly important. And so we developed an open office project while I was the elections committee co-chair with the state party these 2 years, and we developed that and want to definitely be matching people of color into those roles that will help them access that. Yeah, I mean, I think the party has to be careful because, I think we learned in 2016 that you don't want the party to weigh in too soon and determine outcomes. You want to let the people be able to vote and make those decisions. But I think there are ways for us to be able to support those candidates that are coming in with different barriers and to understand that not everyone is stepping out with equal access.
Right.
And so we want to be a partner in that. We want to be a space where we can help to figure out how we level the playing field, how we make it more equitable.
Right.
And really to be thoughtful. I mean, my work currently, I'm a diversity inclusion consultant. So that's something that everything I do, I walk into the room with that lens.
Yes.
So so we will always be thinking about that.
Now, there was a little bit of is the word controversy during your election on Saturday. So tell me from your perspective, what was happening there with was it the issues that were raised about you having a slate of candidates that you brought forward to fill the seat. So talk to us about what went down there.
As I thought about running for a position of chair, I reached out to previous chairs and other folks who had been a part of the county Democrats and the Democratic Party in this region, and asked them about why the county party had seemed to struggle with getting things done, why there had been leadership challenges, and consistently what came back was that their executive boards, that their leadership teams were often not working together, that the chair would get elected, but then the people that they hadn't worked with before were elected, and so there's a lot of time that gets taken up just learning other people's processes. And so I wanted to know that the team that we were going to have to be able to enact some big changes that we want to make in order to open up the county party, open up the space to bring in new people. I knew that I was going to need a solid team who believed in that as well, and who I knew would offset my leadership strengths and my leadership weaknesses. And so, we knew the folks who could, I brought in David Fleetwood as my first vice chair, who's been a chair of the 11th legislative district. I haven't been a chair of a legislative district, so I wanted someone who had that experience. And, the Julia Reed, who's my second vice chair, works for the mayor's office. She and I know each other we went to Princeton together, and we know each other from the Obama administration. So I knew that she and I would work incredibly well together, but I also knew that she was excellent at communications, and that she brought an area of expertise that she works for the city. She knows municipality relations better than I do. And so I knew I was going to need that for 2019. So we felt really strongly that to be successful and to be able to make the changes that we would like to make and be able to enact the vision that we had developed, we were going to need these set of people because of the way that we put the team together to be able to complement one another, and folks who really wanted to get the work. And this is what they really.
The reaction came from my district because they got last several months watching what you just described in terms of building your team before they were actually elected to the seats. And so, my district would say that the protocol or democracy is not being followed in a process like that, because it doesn't give other people the opportunity who may fit that seat as well, an opportunity to be successful or to win those seats. And so talk to us about that. Like, how do you see that? Because you and I talked about a little bit before the show, the double-edged sword in this whole game of democracy is that it is a game and it's not as clean as one would like. And so talk to us about how we then as a district respond to being told who our people are that we have to work with, as opposed to, talk a little bit about that.
I mean, look, we will work with anyone that wants to work with us. The tenets are, you have to believe that you want the space to be opened up and that you want it to be more representative of the community. If you're on board with that, there's space for you. There's space for you. And the way that, we weren't saying that anybody who was not on the slate shouldn't have a voice in the room and shouldn't be a part of the county party. It's just that we knew that this team that we laid out had bought into that vision and had complemented each other in terms of our skill set. We have to think about how we elect people too. The way that that reorg has worked in the past is that people make a decision based off of a 2-minute speech. And that is not the best way to evaluate whether or not someone is able to do the job at hand. We also ran on a set of proposals to some of the changes to the bylaws, and one of those changes was to actually have job descriptions for the vice chairs. Because we really, like, the way that I came into it, I have some experience doing management consulting and, thinking about it kind of like a nonprofit board. We wanted people who wanted to do the job, who wanted to do the work of really trying to create a different type of culture, a different way of doing things within the party.
Well, let's talk about qualified, right? So you and I had a good chuckle about that earlier. Yes. Did you get feedback in your journey that you weren't qualified for this role?
I did. I did. And it's been one of the harder things to hear. People have questioned my experience. They've said I'm not ready. And my response to that is like, please tell me the date when, I'll mark it in my calendar. When the predecessor who had been voted in at the last reorg, I mean, he was, male and 26 years old, and, people still voted for him. I'm 34. I've worked
what nationality was he? I can take a wild guess, right?
I've worked at the White House. I've worked in 4 presidential cycles.
You don't have to. I heard it my entire 6 months too, right? And so where I push back on that comment is who defines qualified, right? So everybody knows I'm an HR person, right? So that is a subjective view about what actually qualified is. And look, I just think we're in times right now that we don't have a qualified president of the United States. We don't have a none of that matters anymore. What, in my opinion, what matters now is, and I said this on my campaign trail, I think the most qualified people right now are the people that actually suffer, because the people who go through and live the lives that we live, we're the ones who understand how to navigate systems and where the injustices are. And so, I'm having to learn, I have thick skin and I do get irritated. I had a Facebook rant last week because I was just so irritated at people's opinions about something they know absolutely nothing about and never lived in our shoes to understand what we bring to the table. And in fact, I'm being told people think that I should run for city council, and I have 3 letters that I would like to say on air, but I won't. I'm not going down. Would you accept going down backwards because somebody has an opinion about this is not what we do, right? So anyhow,
well, and this stuff, I think people forget that it's people's lives at stake. You know, I
Correct.
went down to the border in June. I went to the Texas border, and I witnessed for myself the, migrant children crisis. And I saw children who had been traumatized by ICE. I saw parents who were worried about where their kids were. I saw people who were hungry. I saw trauma. And, we get caught up in fighting these little battles when we need to remember, ultimately, as Democrats, we're on the same side. There's a fascist.
Are we?
Well, there's a fascist in the White House.
Yeah.
We have to be on the same side here.
So how do we, so I agree, but
Mhm.
I don't feel like I belong in the party. I mean, I thought I was before. I mean, I'm happy to, donate my chip-ins every email I get, but obviously that isn't, it doesn't create a sense of belonging, because I
Right.
got a very different perspective on my own campaign, right?
Yes.
About, and so when I experienced what I did, I see now why this country is in the state it is, right? And so just this, head down, not looking up, believing that it's the same conversations of the same type of people and the
Right.
same result. And so
Yes.
I'm worried about 2020. I don't know how
Mhm.
you feel about,
Mhm.
what do you feel about?
Yes, I mean, I'm nervous that the factions that started to develop around 2016 are only going to deepen. And so again, it's like, I just want to remind folks that we can disagree, but we've got to be kind to each other. We've got to assume good intent, but we're disrupting power structures,
Right.
And so it's going to feel a little uncomfortable. There are going to be moments when people are going to feel like, oh, I'm not quite sure, but that's okay. That's part of the process, as long as we come back together at the end of it to support whoever it is that's on this team.
Yes.
Because they're not the same. Democrats and Republicans are not the same. We have a different set of values. And, our values are to be inclusive and to support most vulnerable. And so we've got to continue to keep our eye on the prize there. And we need to make sure that we open, simply by being a woman of color, being at the table, it shifts in the room.
Yeah.
It shifts the way that you can operate, because it forces people to have conversations that they would typically not they'd rather not have to deal with a lot of those things. Right. So I'll keep pushing. We'll keep pushing. You and me will keep pushing. And there's room for you. I don't want to just, the county party has to change the value position that they're giving, which is that it's not just about taking your money, but it's about finding out how we can support you. Yes. And how we can bring your talent. You're more than just your paycheck. You're more than just your, name. So, we need to find out how to put you in a good spot.
And I'm coming back.
I know.
Shasti, God, this half hour, I told you we were going to blink and it was going to be over. But thank you so much for coming on to Heartbeat Radio today. I hope you'll come back through this journey, because somebody in this race knows what it means to be a woman of color, to rise to success. So for all of the audience out there, thank you for joining us today, listening to this. I hope you're as excited about Shasti as I am. Look forward to talking with you next Monday. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Cindi.